Welcome, everyone. So great to see you all today. We're here to meet with Nathan Beard, and you all know Nathan probably. He's one of Tampa Bay's favorite artists whose work is exhibited locally and internationally. Today's conversation will be hosted by myself, Mary Childs, and Elizabeth Brincklow. We are curators and arts professionals in the Tampa Bay area and beyond. So I'd like to introduce Elizabeth first. And of course, Nathan, we're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone again for joining us.
Thanks, Mary. This afternoon, we welcome Nathan Beard. We'll hear more about Nathan's art practice as based in transformation and the exploration of many worlds in his life practice. So welcome, Nathan. Thanks for being with us. Looks like Nathan is muted.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
There we go.
There he is.
Hey,
Sorry.
Thanks.
Sorry about
Welcome, Nathan.
Catherine.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today.
Sure.
Thanks for the opportunity as well to show my work with you and work with you on yet another occasion. We'll get into some of that later, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then and get the presentation up here.
It's great.
Looks like people are coming in. Or you can go ahead and lock it.
So I'm just going to chat a little bit about myself and where I come from and my background with this. We can look at these different paintings here while I do so. I'm relatively new to Florida. We've been here for 10.5 years. So I guess that's not real new, but it's compared to Elizabeth, it's a freshly born babe. Elizabeth, you've lived here your whole life, haven't you?
There were about 23 years that I was not here. So,
right. Okay.
But it's always been in my blood. Yeah, you know.
You grew up in Dunedin, and we had a special time in Hammock Park together.
Yeah.
So I moved here from Denver, Colorado with my wife, Kate, in 2010. And I have a bachelor's degree in painting from Colorado State University. I grew up on a dairy farm outside of Buffalo, New York. After high school, I traveled to Egypt for 1 year as an exchange student. On my return, I worked out at a ranch in northern Wyoming for a cumulative time of about 2 years. And I did so because I had really wanted to be a cowboy. That's what I wanted to do. And that's why I went to Colorado State. They have an excellent agricultural program. And, but I guess I changed my mind through the course of things, and I stayed at CSU because I guess I felt it would be good for me to be in a general ed kind of school instead of an art school, so that I could meet people of all walks of life and who are pursuing different passions. So after college, I worked as an art consultant in Denver with a woman named Hillary DiPolo, and kind of learned the back end of the art business with her. And it was a really good experience, getting exposed to all the different avenues that an artist can use to build a career and be successful in making art. Obviously, working with galleries is a great way to go. It's a traditional kind of way to go, but there's so many other ways of working as an artist and other people to work with. And of course, it takes a sort of mixed bag of tricks to build a career in the arts. So through that job, I also learned art installation, which I've used quite heavily here in Florida, with Articles Art Gallery in St. Petersburg and their clients, the University of Tampa, the Scarfo and Hart Gallery, and most notably, Dunedin Fine Art Center, where I work now with Catherine Bergman as assistant curator. So I'd like to maybe get into the work here. When I moved to Florida, I actually hadn't planned on continuing in the arts at all. I was very interested in the Everglades and the wetlands issues here in Florida, and thought about very seriously getting my master's degree at the University of South Florida in environmental science, so that I could be a part of the solution, I guess, with the Everglades in particular. Kate and I had taken a road trip before moving down here, and I was just really ensconced with the layering of plant life here and the fecundity of plant life here. It's, any newcomer to Florida will know and will tell you how exotic the life is here as compared to, Denver. But I think another thing that was really fascinating for me was the fact that you couldn't see through the landscape like Colorado. It's very vista oriented with the mountains and everything. Here you really can't see through anything, through the mangroves or through the forests. So I really liked that a lot, that there's a sort of air of mystery about things, and maybe a little bit of danger with the exotic animals and poisonous snakes and etc. What we're talking about today in particular is a body of work that I call Pond's Edge. Pond's Edge does reference, in a way, sort of, that idea of Walden's Pond, or something that a very calm, fresh body of water that could be poetic in a way. When we did move to Florida, we decided to start a family, which is another thing that we didn't necessarily move to Florida for. But we decided that the timing was right. And so it just so happened with the jobs that we had that it made sense for me to stay home with our daughter, Vera. And so, we would go to the Crescent Lake Park. It's a nearby park here in St. Petersburg. We would go there daily, and there's a little pond, sort of a retention area. There's a lake, and then separated from the lake by cattails and other kinds of plants is this little pond area. And these are pictures that I took of that pond. And this is an area that's very special for me because I was able to sit on the bank with Vera and teach her, some of her first words, like, bird and fish and turtle and frog, stuff like that. So there's lots of really nice memories wrapped up in this. And at the time, I was sort of vacating the idea of going into environmental science. And since she was taking 3-hour-long naps, I thought I would start to get back into making art again. And I was working on a series that I started in college, but it didn't have the same allure. And so I really decided that I needed to start over or start fresh and kind of just go into the studio with my 2 or 3 hours between naps and just paint and see what happened. And now I've always been drawn to abstraction. So I didn't quite know what I was going to do. So I just went out and painted. And I think when I captured these images, what I was really drawn to is basically the bottom 3/4 of these images is completely abstract. You could see that how awesome this would be in paint with lots of dripping and smudging and stuff like that. So that's what I was really excited about. So I'll go back to the studio and try different things. And one of the things that came about was I did a little bit of reading too, catching up on some techniques that I never learned in college or just brushing up. And one of the things I got really excited about was spraying rubbing alcohol on the surface of the acrylic paintings. The alcohol resists the water and it pushes it out into these like circles, which is a really fun kind of texture, visual texture. And you can see them here. Another thing that happened was the development of this kind of swooshy gesture. I'm also playing with a lot of dripping, a lot of brush work. This one on the right, if I remember correctly, is called Memory of Thunderstorm in New Mexico. So there's kind of a sun back in the hills here. If you've ever been through New Mexico, there's long straight roads where these thunderstorms can be right over you, but you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, as it were. It's really beautiful. So a lot of these early paintings were not only about abstraction and playing with new techniques and stuff, but also about the idea of memory and how we remember things and how we don't remember things and how we build stories around what we remember and what we don't remember, filling in the blanks in a way. So fast forward a little bit here and really getting into these interlocking gestures again. So the idea of the gesture becomes really important, not only in terms of making art, but as a metaphor. The hand that we put to the world, individually and collectively, we all use our human will to try to build the world that we desire to live in. This one on the right is called Memory of Falling Waters. And Falling Waters is a state park in the panhandle of Florida. It's quote unquote the tallest waterfall in Florida. And it's actually a creek that falls into a sinkhole, but it's pretty cool. So we went camping there one time. It's up near the Florida Caverns. And again, just the gesture, and then this incomplete idea of leaves. So this kind of ghost memory of plant life. So then here's another piece where you can see the alcohol in here. You can see a lot of the abstraction that I was messing around with. I remember distinctly this piece and how all of this happened. That this was a piece I was not pleased with. There's something about, you can see these greens and grays back here. It was very dull in a way. So I took an old t-shirt and I made that kind of swooshing cleaning, almost like I was cleaning the surface. And it was one of those eureka moments in the studio where it doesn't happen like a lot, but when it does, it's so important for an artist to step back and listen or see what's going on. And there's something about this movement that I really liked. So I decided to stop and let the wet paint dry and then go back in and fill in this kind of red and purple form in the background, which I thought was just kind of interesting. And it still wasn't enough for me. So I reached into my toolbox from college, and in one of our classes is very much about making textures and stuff without a brush. And one of the things we did is use painter's tape to create a resist. So I added it, just not knowing what was going to happen. And you can see here that it kind of goes from a warm yellow and fades out into these neutral creams. what I really enjoyed about this after I looked at it was how when the lines got small and close together, it kind of helped almost in a way dimensionalize the form. And as they got further apart and bigger, they started to act almost like a window blind. And so you had this very almost dualistic thing that was happening that in the middle melded together, which I really enjoyed. So I made a bunch of these, and I'm gonna fast forward to number 50. This, by the way, is the very first of the abstract series that I do, which is called Exit Music. This is number 50, and you can see the obvious difference and growth and in the technique and the control and exploration and the size. This piece is about 5 by 12 feet. It's 3 panels that are bolted together. It's really huge. I got a couple of detail shots. You can see this sort of Jackson Pollock-esque painting that's going on under here. The energy in this piece is really exciting. And but it's held together with, again, that kind of this kind of gesture, right? And now this is a very I work on this gesture a lot before I finalize it. And what I do try to do is I try to get it all in one sweep, one load of the brush. In some ways, like a Sumier painter might with calligraphy or something. That's kind of what the control I was looking for in these. Now it's important to note that these, well, I'll talk a lot about it in a little bit, but.
Nathan, I have a question. Okay, so when you go back to that image and you're talking about trying to get each of those strokes to be one stroke, so you have to do that parallel, you have to make the lines parallel to each other every time you do that?
Oh, okay. So what I'm doing is I'm talking about the bigger forms. So right. Just the big red, that's made with big house painting brushes.
Okay.
All these stripes that you see here,
yes,
in these details, that's the tape. Each one of those is a piece of tape that I cut by hand. And there's several layers of that. I have to do one layer and then remove some and then put another layer. So it's extremely methodical and tedious work, especially when you think about 12 feet of it. And then, having to do the top part before I can do the bottom part. And then trying to do that while keeping it all clean was very challenging. I mentioned before the importance of the gesture and the meaning of it, the metaphor of it being how we put our hand to the world. And behind all of this is a silhouette of a forearm and a hand. There's a fingers here and the thumb. And so this is a really big piece. And I think to me, this was like the culmination of the idea of human will and balancing human will with chaos and, whatever happens in the world. So this is a very important, not only aesthetically and artistically, but spiritually for me, coming to terms with how I can act in the world in a balanced way. Mm-hmm. This big piece was part of a bigger show, and this whole show was a very linear kind of thought process about how ideas are born, how we receive them, how we process them, how we project our thoughts towards action, and then the last piece was how we ritualize our actions into traditions. So this whole show was at Gallery 221 at Hillsborough Community College. The curator then was Patty Sriram. And this was a wonderful opportunity to use shaped canvas, well, not canvases, but shaped panels, really think outside the box. with the technique, and really get into the idea and really think about and meditate about how we act in the world. So these shaped panels, I had to use a router, and if you look at the back of these, I cut out a lot of the particle board on here to make them lighter and more manageable. And I ended up with a bunch of scraps, and I didn't want to throw the scraps away, so I used them to make this piece that's called Empty Spaces. And what you can't see on here is all the edges are painted an iridescent gold. And this piece was made for the Skyway show. The Skyway show is an important exhibition here in Tampa, in Sarasota, and St. Petersburg, involving our major museums, where they highlight our area's most interesting or exciting artists. And so I was just so honored to be part of the first Skyway exhibition and have this piece in the show along with another one. But this kind of goes along. This was a very interesting year. This was 2017, and I had started working with a woman named Noriko Kuhn, who began showing some of my work in Japan. And I was really thinking about how the heck am I going to ship giant paintings to Japan? And this was the same year that I was awarded a Creative Pinellas Emerging Artist Grant. And I worked with Elizabeth on that. It was the first year of the grant. And we had a conundrum with wall space for our artists, I remember. And we thought about, well, could we build some movable walls, maybe that this gallery could use in the future? That didn't come to pass. And I had already been thinking about how to ship large paintings to Japan. And then it dawned on me that I could make scrolls, and that would tie into the Japanese aesthetic. Now, to go back to this Empty Pieces piece, I'm already thinking here about, again, memory and gaps in memory and gaps in stories, and how we sometimes kind of gloss over what we don't know, or we make up stuff, new stuff, or whatever. And I mean, in some ways it makes life more interesting, and in others it makes it more complicated. Is it a white lie? Is it a real lie? Or, is it the actual truth? Those are kind of questions I was playing with. And I was really taking cue from a tradition in Japan called kintsugi, which is fixing broken pottery with lacquer and sprinkling gold dust on it. And I love not only the aesthetic of this, but the whole idea behind fixing something that's broken rather than making a new one and throwing this one away. And not only, from a cultural standpoint, our culture is obviously very consumerist, and, we have one-time use things and we throw all of that. But again, as a metaphor for human beings and relationships, aren't there times in a relationship where it would be better to fix what is broken than just throw the whole thing away? And obviously not always the case. Sometimes you just got to move on. But, in my own personal history, it's been better to fix the thing than to move on. So it's very personal to me as well. Now, these scrolls, as you can see, combine some plant forms with the abstraction that I've been developing since 2013, so 4 years or so. And I'd always thought that the shadows and reflections that plants cast on water reminded me a lot of kanji, Japanese writing. And, so the thought that kintsugi that our stories could be a type of kintsugi that held past, present, and future together was kind of where I was going with this whole series. And then this piece here, which I sent to Japan, it's a small one, it's 18 by 24, was called Lost in Translation. And, you know, the whole process of working with Japanese, where the language is so different, and there's a lot that just doesn't come across, especially when I'm trying to talk about what I'm talking about right now to people who are not native English speakers. You know, it just sort of, there's a lot that gets lost. And so at the bottom, you can see buried under this kind of distortion is a reflection of these same loops. So they're there, they're just buried under static. So here's a close-up of the one of the scrolls. And another thing I love doing sometimes is mixing dirt. Well, in Florida, dirt is sand, basically, into the gesso that is used to prepare the surface, and it really does a nice job of breaking up the paint and making a nice surface. And then culminating, the kintsugi idea is culminating in this ongoing project called Lifelines. And this was made for a show, a 3-person show I was in at the Leeper Ratner Museum, curated by Christine Rent Carter in 2019. And this painting, it represents 6 generations of my extended family. And there's 5 families: my wife's family, my mother and father's family, and then both of my step families. Each one of these lines is a specific person. So they're sort of born here. They travel through space and time. They get married. When they get married and start having children, they create these braids. Mm. And then the braids break apart, as you can see here, as the children move out and start their own families. So Vera and Kate and I are up here somewhere. We're at the very end. And then all these darker lines are actually an iridescent gold. And those are all the people that are deceased. And so they're the kintsugi. There are stories that hold our family together. So I also want to take special note of this kind of rippling that's happening here, because this will come into play with the pond's edge. Now, I'm going through all of this because I just want everyone to know that the pond's edge work, the pond's edge work started at the same time as the exit music work. So they've grown up together. And in fact, it took me a while to kind of cobble together the understanding that they were feeding 2 parts of my psyche or emotions, that I needed to do both for different reasons. At the beginning, you know, I was really exploring just one set of abstraction and kind of, you know, what kind of abstraction do I want to do? And when I landed on the exit music kind of taping and that kind of swooping gesture, it kind of released the pond's edge work from having to be what it could be as referential as I wanted it to be. It didn't have to be abstract exactly. But you can see that these are number 2 and number 3, I think, of Pond's Edge. You can see that there is still a notion of abstraction in them with the painting style. So I've enjoyed continuing that and really trying to push that and be in that kind of in between representation and abstraction with Pond's Edge. I just wanted to say that COVID has really helped me, in a way, refocus the exit music work, and I've gone back to basics and just working with scale and color. And I've really enjoyed these 3, which were kind of meant to be an exploration of yellow, blue, and red, the primaries. And then in titling them, I was very much concerned about, again, just memories and impressions of places and people. This is named after my favorite plant that I see in the neighborhood, the ruby cordyline. And this yellow one is named after my favorite time of day, the golden hour. And this one is sold. It's what was it called? Beachfront property or something. I don't quite remember. But so
Nathan,
uh,
can you begin to talk about the process of creating Pond's Edge?
mhm. Um, yeah, I'll just go through. So what I do is I showed you the first couple of photos at the very beginning of the pond at the park. I work from reference photos, and I'll take those photos whenever we're out for a walk, and I take them at all kinds of different waterways here in Florida. Most of which in our urban neighborhoods happen to be artificial, like canals and sort of retention ponds and stuff like that. There are a number of pieces. This one, for example, is from a photo taken at Brooker Creek, which is in northern, is it in Pinellas County? Or is it another? I think so.
I think Brooker Creek is in Pinellas, yes.
Yeah, it's north of Dunedin, and it's a really beautiful, pristine natural area, so preserve. So I start with these reference photos, and one of our other favorite parks in the area is Sawgrass Lake Park. And Sawgrass Lake Park is one of the first parks we started going to when we moved to St. Pete. It's a really, really interesting place. It's an oasis in the middle of the city that is bordered on one side by I-275, a major highway, and on the other side is a gun range. And when we first started going there, on the weekends, you would be sitting out on this, they have this two-story gazebo. You can sit out and look over the lake and stuff. And you would hear this pop, 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 pop from across the lake. And it was the gun range. And it saw this really like conflicting sense of being out in nature and going there for respite, right, from daily life, and then just sort of interrupted by shooting and traffic. And so it's a very interesting place for that reason to me. Another thing I love about Sawgrass Lake Park is it's quite reflective of the urban environment in general, where there's these canals that feed the lake and drain the lake. And these canals are partly a huge reason why many of us can live here in Florida. They drain a lot of land that is used to build houses. Naturally, it would be seasonal wetlands and impossible to live in. And it's the artificiality of it that really draws me in, because, well, this is a perfect example too, isn't it? Hammock Park is near the Fine Arts Center where I worked in Dunedin. It's also where I take all my students that I teach at the Art Center. And you can see these dead straight blue lines. These are all canals. Now, Elizabeth, I remember you talking that you used to walk to the high school, which is somewhere over here.
Yes.
Through the swamp, or woods, right? Through these woods.
Yeah, through the hammock. It's a wetland. So
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So, and now it's different. But now what I love about it is the plant life. I've always been drawn to the plant life in the water. And I guess that's kind of what I want to get to. But first, I'll just talk about taking the pictures. This is one of my favorite spots at Hammock Park to take pictures. It's right near the playground. And this is Elizabeth's photo of me chatting away. And so I just did a little series of how I could take a photo like this. And I'm going to zoom in on this area. And I'm going to crop it. And I'm going to use this photo as a reference photo for a drawing or a painting. Now, what's really important here is the removal from context, because this area right here is a dead straight canal. Well, actually, this is a creek that empties into dead straight canal. It's the idea of removing something from context that really, it's not exactly what the Pond's Edge work is about, but it's what I think a lot about when I'm making them. This is that area again, and I was just going to show you some of the techniques that I use. I started this painting already in the class that I teach, and I'm going to focus on this piece in the background. To build the surface, I use a lot of like just really wet and loose techniques. I'm not really concerned about painting every single leaf. I'm more interested in capturing the energy of nature rather than, you know, being exact about this stick and that ripple and stuff. And so this is the reference photo for the painting. One of the students in the class, Sue Beach, here I work on the floor a lot. I work flat because I'm working with a lot of wet paint. You can see me with a spray bottle here, a lot of dripping and pouring and splattering. It's a very messy kind of process. You can see from my pants. This is another one of my favorite new techniques, is to have two canvases that are the same size or nearly so. And I start this one and then I'll lay this one down face to face and kind of transfer some of the paint. And now this one is a template for another painting. So it just gives me something exciting to start with, and also to deal with compositionally, whether I want to keep things or erase things. So this is the canal in Hammock Park. You know, there's birds and stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff in it. It's a beautiful place, but that's the thing with Florida is how and the problem with the Everglades is it's not getting the water that it needs to be a healthy ecosystem because of all the canals that were dug south of Lake Okeechobee to drain the area of water for farming and living and things like that. So it's a double-edged sword. This is one of my newest paintings that's hanging up in the faculty exhibit at Dunedin Fine Arts Center right now. So if you want to go see it, come on by. This piece also was started from an image in a canal that borders one of our major roads linking two highways. This is not really publicly accessible. There's a fence back here. I kind of snuck through and got bitten by some fire ants along the way. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in on this image. So here's the reference photograph. So another big part of the work is this idea of transformation. And like I said before, when we remove something from context, when we remove this piece of the puzzle from the canal, this could really be in any body of water. And the fact that I'm, calling it Pond's Edge leads us to believe that it's, kind of a bucolic, romantic kind of place when actually it's very artificial. I really like that kind of tension for myself in making the work. Now this image is really gray and quite dull. And so the painting itself is a transformation in color, in the sense that, I added all this pink because I just thought it would be fun. And above all, painting should be fun to make. This is one of my favorite plants to paint. it's water lettuce. And water lettuce, I found these facts on the University of Florida website. This particular plant is not necessarily considered invasive, but it is definitely a problem plant. It clogs waterways, it degrades water quality, reduces biological diversity. And there are other plants that are even worse, like the water hyacinth. And another one of my favorites to paint is the this plant down here that's under the water is called hydrilla. And I just really love it. This is a lot of times with these photographs, I'll use digital media to pump out some colors and change colors and bring out some contrast just to help me imagine the scene in a different way. And so I just love all this hydrilla under here, and it's really fun to paint. And here's the final painting, and just using a foam brush to make all these little marks here in different colors. But again, hydrilla is a terrible plant for our waterways in many of the same ways that water lettuce is. And so it just, for me, it, you know, painting these plants in this way helps me think a lot about what we find beautiful and why we find it beautiful. Being a transplant to Florida, you know, we walk around the neighborhoods and see all these beautiful exotic plants in people's yards that are not native to Florida either. And then the more you live here, the more you find out that there's a lot of animals that aren't supposed to be here either. But I enjoy this kind of complexity a lot. It's really fertile ground for thinking about the general questions, you know, what is beauty? How do we define beauty? And then in the individual sense, how do I define beauty? Because that's important too, as opposed to we collectively. So that's kind of the process that I go through.
Nathan, do you work on several series at a time? Do you go back and forth between the series?
I usually work on one or the other. Okay, so I'll work on Pond's Edge for maybe a couple of months or 6 months or something until I kind of get tapped out in that direction. And then I'll need to go back to the exit music to feed that part of my soul and brain and stuff. A lot of it too has to do with projects or deadlines. So I've been working on Pond's Edge for a longer time than usual because I've had this project I've been working on for the city of Clearwater. I showed you the last 3 exit music paintings that I made, and that was towards the end of last year. And I was going to do another 3 of those in orange, purple, and green, but I had to put those off. So I go back and forth. Again, it's sort of a balancing act for me.
Yeah, you're going from a very determined, directed style to a more intuitive, more flowing approach.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good artistically. Pond's Edge helps me practice drawing and observing again, and which is really important actually for the exit music work. I think any good abstract work feels like it's well drawn. And what I mean by that is that the relationships between things are balanced and the composition is balanced. And there's an eye towards building that out in a way that moves your eye through the work and in a powerful way. Conceptually, you know, the exit music work is, like I said, very much about how we act in the world. It's about taking action. where the Pond's Edge is series is literally about sitting back and watching. So, sometimes you need to sit and watch, and sometimes you need to act, and knowing when to do those things is not always clear. So I guess in making these works, for me, it's about practicing that awareness.
Thank you.
This is the project for Clearwater I was referring to. What they're doing is they're covering all their traffic signal boxes with art by local artists. This is for the Spring Branch neighborhood in Clearwater, and they are very much concerned and passionate about the Spring Branch watershed. And the Spring Branch is basically a creek that starts in Dunedin, North Dunedin, and it runs all the way through Clearwater and empties out into the Saltwater Bay. And so this one was very challenging because I don't do panoramic landscapes. And so we kind of agreed upon a concept of, what would a walk along the creek kind of look like? And so instead of doing one piece that would cover the whole box, I did 6 new paintings, one for each side of the box. So we have this bigger rectangle that has obviously the 4 sides. And then we have this little appendage that has an extra 2 sides on it. And so one of the requests from the neighborhood was, would it be possible to put some of the wildlife that's in the creek in the paintings? And so normally I don't paint wildlife. It's just not what I do. But I thought, what a fun challenge, and let's give it a whirl. So again, here we'll go through this process here of starting with reference photographs and cropping it and playing with it in the computer, in photo editing, and really narrowing down the focus. This photograph, and this is another new thing for me in this project, is working from somebody else's photograph. This is the photograph, one of the photographs that was taken by Alexandra Nixon, who is the president of the Spring Branch Neighborhood Association. And again, this is very panoramic. So, it's not what I do. So I really cued in on these ferns on the side here. And you can see how the process went. And then this is the final painting here. These are all the 6 paintings. They're all like 36 inches high, except for this one here is 54 inches high. So I painted them large so that, I would have decent sized paintings to show and sell in the future. And then the other thing was that box is, 72 inches high. So I wanted to make them big so that when it came to reproducing them, they wouldn't get too pixelated. So there's a lot to think about in a project like this. These are reproduced on outdoor vinyl, sort of I don't want to call it wallpaper, but in a way it's for the outdoors, which is really ingenious. Let's say this gets damaged by something, it's easy enough for this man, Jack Fury, who's the installer, to print another one and put it up. So it's a really ingenious way of livening up and artifying the neighborhood.
I know the Cynthia McGregor is actually listening in today, and she's on the board of Spring Branch neighborhood. Yes. And yeah, they're all just very excited about the opportunity to include art in their neighborhood, and it's just adding so much value to the neighborhood.
Well, I don't want to speak for Cynthia.
Beauty. Well, I'll speak for Cynthia.
Yeah.
Only a little.
at our initial meeting, we talked a lot about the educational opportunity that artwork can provide in a public setting. I know they have some plans for some other things there that will reinforce, the educational opportunities here. But in many ways, this is a busy intersection, and people sitting at the stoplight. These boxes are so utilitarian. They're stainless steel, and in a way, putting artwork on them, it just kind of warms the whole corner up. It humanizes it again. And I just think that's so important, especially for people, waiting in their cars and, our hurried lives from here to there. If we were to, stop and look over at a stainless steel electric box, it's just be like, oh, geez, it's just so much nicer to see something human made on these.
I like this particular location because of what isn't around it, so that it allows the utility box to really stand out.
That's a good point. Yeah, there's no buildings it's on the southwest corner of the intersection. There's no buildings on that corner at all. So yeah, it's a great place for this project. So I think that's kind of.
Nathan, it's just a wonderful explanation of how you you are introducing or sharing, your love of beauty, and showing us how to see beauty in the very small moments of everything we look at, and creating something that we can all enjoy and share through the art. As you said, we look at a canal, but we don't actually then see, the little plant life, the reflections, the shadows. It's, and you mentioned in one of our conversations too, that it mirrors the layers of our lives as well, the complexity of our lives.
Yeah, I forgot to talk about, that's a really kind of important.
Well, but you show it in the work and the way you speak about the work.
We could look at this image, for example, that, there's so many things going on in this picture. There's all the plants on the surface. There's the plants under the surface. There's the floor down here of the pond or canal or whatever it is. There's the reflection of the sky in the light. And, for me, the most satisfying images are the ones that capture all of those layers together, and in some ways create a sense of vertigo, where it becomes hard to know what's up and what's down in them. And and to me, it's a way of seeing the universe in a little puddle, because I want to go back to, sorry, I'll just go back to this first image. Here, when you really look at this image, there's you can see the sky, and there are times of day when you can see the moon in a reflection, and it's really kind of a cosmic thing. You have to sit there and wait, though, is the thing. It's not a passing glance. You have to stand at the edge of the waterway and really look, and it's almost like you're looking into space without looking up. And I find that inverted kind of experience is really really powerful for me.
Um, we're going to take the time at this point to ask if anyone has any questions. You can put them in the chat. We're happy, or if you have any comments for Nathan, he's explained so much in so much depth that I don't think there's a lot left undescribed, but I think the description has given us all a lot of food for thought. If there's not further questions, we do have a few questions for Nathan. Nathan, one of the questions that Elizabeth and I were thinking about was what pivotal piece do you feel validated your work and really started leading to recognition?
That's a really hard question. It's kind of like the people you meet in your lives. They all play a pivotal role in one way or another. But to me, I feel like this piece was really important in the evolution of the abstract body of work, because this piece is 10 feet wide, and it's the first really, really big piece that I did.
Yeah.
It's also the first piece where the idea of these two forms, these two gestures, individual gestures, coming together to form a circle, where they're working together in a way. I'm not going to go into the ideas behind this piece exactly, because it's probably its own presentation, but it has to do with the way that we focus. It has to do with the question of what happens to reality when we're not looking at it from a quantum point of view. But yeah, this piece was really, really seminal in my confidence in saying I can paint these really, really big, and I feel like I can do them well. All this texture here also is really exciting. It's Spanish moss. Yeah. And Spanish moss is endemic to the South. So, this is a really fun texture, and I used it because it reminded me of, the idea of the fabric of the universe. And this was made for actually a really important show in my career at Dunedin Fine Arts Center, way back when, with Yala Ford. And I made this piece specifically for that show. So this piece has a lot of importance to me. In terms of Pond's Edge, we never talked too much about the drawings that I do in this series, but these drawings opened my eyes to how I wanted the paintings to actually be. Mm-hmm. So before I was doing the drawings, I was just kind of getting used to, how do I paint light? How do I paint reflections? How do I do this? The drawings really brought in the idea of the energy that was behind the movement on the water, and the energy that's in plants. Even when water's not moving, all the molecules in the water are moving. And even if the wind is not blowing plants, there's all kinds of movement happening within the plants. There's air expiring out, or oxygen expiring out of the plant, and CO2 going into the plant. So if you think about things on an atomic scale, nature is never still. And so I wanted to reflect that in the work itself with the gesture, again, the gesture of the artist, me being obviously part of nature as well. So the next challenge after starting these drawings, it's been sort of a 2.5 to 3 year kind of quest, actually, that I just figured out last year while I was teaching a class. I figured out that what I was doing, quote unquote, wrong was I was painting on the wrong surface for what I wanted. And I had been painting on panel, which is a really smooth surface. And then I thought, well, I'm going to paint on canvas, but I didn't like the bounce. There was something about the bounce that wasn't helping me. So I stapled canvas to board, and I had the best of both worlds, and started making really exciting work that the last, I would say 10 or 20, I really, by the way, there's 100 of the Pond's Edge and 100 of the exit music. They're right, like I said, side by side with each other. Starting to make paintings like this that are really pushing the sense of abstraction. But this, there's still, the plant life is here, the reflections, the sense of light and sky and clouds. This one I made for the Creative Pinellas Arts Annual a couple years ago. I just really love, the calligraphic nature of these marks and the kind of ghost imagery that's happening here. Again, just really speaking to how nature is always moving. And then this is one of my favorites from Brooker Creek. I was lucky to work with Lynn Whitelaw,
Yes.
who manages the gallery at Brooker Creek. And I made a bunch of pieces for that show around Brooker Creek. And again, these gestures, just really quick, spontaneous, is really what I'm after in these paintings now. So.
Well, I'd like to make note that the Pond's Edge, 13 or 14 of the Pond's Edge series works are on exhibition at Dunedin City Hall Gallery, with a lot of thanks to the city administration for opening up the gallery to our local and regional artists. It's a way to note the importance of art to our city, not only the city staff, but also the city at large. So the works are available to be seen before and after city meetings at this point, due to the pandemic, but we're hoping to be able to offer some opportunities to come and visit the gallery, so that everyone can have an opportunity to see these beautiful works.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And also the link to the catalog is in the chat as well.
So we did have, Mary and I did discuss another question and wanted to ask, was there a partnership with someone who believed in your work and that really propelled you forward in your art making?
Yeah, that's kind of like asking who's your favorite kid. It's so hard, as an artist working with so many different people, and I can't pick one person out without feeling like I have to name them all. Not only because of, I don't want to leave anybody out, but also because of how incredibly interconnected the Tampa Bay art scene is, and how collaborative the Tampa Bay art scene is. And, I think when I think about it, it would be impossible to do what I'm doing without the support of my wife and daughter. Their generosity of time and patience, and being an artist is a very difficult thing to do. When you're not in the studio, you've got to be out mingling, and which, by the way, does not pay by the hour. But so it's difficult. It's difficult. So I'm just so grateful for my family, and then I would say that my parents as well. We rent our house here in St. Pete from my father and stepmother who live in Denver, and it has a detached garage, and I've painted in my living room before, and it's a pretty big imposition on everyone in the house. So it's nice to have a separate studio that I don't have to drive to either, especially considering, staying at home with an infant and that became a toddler who is now almost 10. We can balance all of these things with the space that we're lucky to live in. And then, my mom and stepdad in North Carolina have been equally supportive. We go up there during the summers, and I turn their back screen porch into a studio. So that I've always enjoyed that too.
Well, thank you, Nathan. We're going to sum up with one final question that Elizabeth and I pondered over, and that is, if you had to describe the intention of your artwork using one word, what would that be?
Meditation. Or in another word that some other people would use is prayer. I don't follow any particular religion or necessarily believe in God per se. I am aware of higher powers, obviously, natural energies and cosmic energies and quantum energies. I'm not sure about a personal power, higher power, but maybe I'll figure that out later. But this artwork is what I have for the time being to kind of ponder all of the big questions in life, and then also to act as catharsis for any kind of problems that I'm having. So that's, one word would just be meditation for sure.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all for coming today and sharing this hour, a little more than an hour with us. We believe that this will be the first in a series of meetings with wonderful artists such as Nathan, and we hope that you will join us again. So have a wonderful Sunday evening, and thank you all. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Elizabeth, and everyone that's chosen to join us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you both for the opportunity to work with you and to show at the City Hall Gallery.
Thanks so much.
Have a great evening, everyone. Take care. See you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.